If we look at the idea of God not as an unquestionable truth, but as a concept humans created, a very different picture emerges. The evidence doesn't come from one single discovery or revelation, but from a wide network of patterns in history, psychology, and culture. These patterns tell a story of how humans, facing uncertainty and limitation, created something bigger than themselves to provide comfort, order, and meaning. Human beings have always been meaning makers. We turn random events into narratives, patterns into stories, and the unknown into something we can name. In the earliest human societies, forces like lightning, floods, disease, and famine seemed unpredictable and terrifying. Without science or reliable knowledge, the easiest way to explain these forces was to imagine an invisible agent controlling them. The storm wasn't just a natural event. It was a god expressing anger. The river didn't just flood. It was a spirit demanding respect. When you live in a world you don't understand, giving human-like intentions to the unknown makes it feel less chaotic. Anthropologists studying ancient hunter-gatherer societies have found that early religious ideas almost always centered around personifying nature. This wasn't because early humans had proof of divine beings. It was because the human brain is wired to detect agency, to assume that if something happens, someone caused it. In evolutionary terms, it's better to be overly cautious and imagine a predator in the bushes than to ignore it and risk death. Over time, that instinct was applied not just to predators, but to weather, illness, and even luck. As civilizations formed, this instinct evolved into organized religion. Gods became more sophisticated, and stories about them became tools for explaining not just natural events, but moral and social order. Religion gave rulers divine approval, and it gave laws a sacred authority. If a king claimed his right to rule came directly from the gods, challenging him wasn't just rebellion. It was blasphemy. This gave religion a political function. It was a way to stabilize power and discourage dissent. We can see this clearly in ancient Mesopotamia, Egypt, and later in medieval Europe. In every case, belief in gods wasn't just about private faith. It was embedded in the entire social structure. Religious stories explained why society was arranged the way it was, who should be in charge, and why certain people should obey others. In this sense, the invention of gods served a dual purpose: reducing existential uncertainty and reinforcing social control. One of the most telling signs that God is a human invention is how differently he appears across cultures. If there were a single, universal God revealing himself clearly to all people, you'd expect the descriptions to be at least somewhat consistent. Instead, we see gods with human flaws, preferences, and personalities that reflect the cultures that worship them. Ancient Greek gods were vain, jealous, and impulsive, just like the humans who imagined them. Norse gods valued honor in battle. Hindu deities express ideas about balance, destruction, and renewal. In each case, the divine reflects the values, fears, and environment of the people who worship. Even within the same religion, the concept of God changes over time. The God of the Old Testament is radically different in tone and behavior from the God preached in many modern churches. This shift mirrors changes in social values, political realities, and moral expectations. When society changes, God changes with it, not the other way around. Psychology also offers clues about why humans invent gods. Studies in cognitive science show that humans have what's called a hyperactive agency detection device. Our brains are quick to assume that unexplained events have intentional causes. Combine that with our tendency to create stories that explain suffering, and it's no surprise that the idea of a divine plan emerged. If a loved one dies, it's psychologically easier for many people to believe there's a purpose behind it than to accept it as random tragedy. In this way, belief in God acts as a coping mechanism, turning chaos into narrative. This coping function isn't trivial. Research has shown that belief can reduce anxiety about death, provide social cohesion, and even improve health outcomes through reduced stress. But just because something is comforting doesn't make it true. People invent all sorts of stories to feel safe. Fairy tales for children, heroic myths for nations, personal narratives that cast us as the main character of our lives. God, in many ways, is the ultimate human story. One that gives every event, no matter how small, a place in a grand cosmic plan. We also have to consider how the invention of God intersects with morality. Many people believe that without God, there would be no moral foundation. But moral thinking exists in species that have no religion at all. We see cooperation, empathy, and fairness in primates, dolphins, elephants, and even some birds. These behaviors evolved because they increased survival for social species. Religion may have codified moral rules, but it didn't create morality itself. In fact, the moral codes in holy books often reflect the biases and limitations of the societies that wrote them. They contain both noble principles and outdated, harmful rules. The human origin of these rules becomes clear when we see how selectively they are applied, interpreted, and changed over time. Another clue comes from how religions compete and adapt. Throughout history, as cultures have encountered each other, gods have merged, been rebranded, or been replaced altogether. The Roman Empire absorbed gods from conquered lands, blending them with their own pantheon. When Christianity spread, it incorporated pagan festivals and symbols to make conversion easier. This adaptability shows that religion is a cultural product, not an immutable truth handed down without human influence. Some might argue that these changes are simply different human interpretations of the same divine truth. But if that were the case, we'd expect a slow convergence toward agreement over time. Instead, the number of distinct religious movements has multiplied. Today, there are thousands of active religions, each claiming to represent the true God. This diversity makes far more sense if gods are created by humans than if humans are all responding to the same real being. Modern science has further eroded the need for supernatural explanations. Thunder is no longer the voice of an angry sky god. Disease isn't caused by evil spirits but by viruses and bacteria. The universe doesn't require a personal creator to explain its existence. Physics offers models for how matter, energy, and even time itself can emerge without divine intervention. As our understanding grows, the space where God is needed to explain reality keeps shrinking. And yet, the idea of God persists. This isn't because the evidence is getting stronger, but because the emotional appeal remains powerful. God offers the promise of justice when life feels unfair, the comfort of reunion with loved ones after death, and the feeling that our lives are part of something eternal. These are deep human desires, and they don't vanish just because our intellectual understanding improves. The truth is, we are storytelling creatures. We build myths to understand ourselves and the world. Gods are part of that tradition, shaped by the minds, needs, and fears of the people who created them. Understanding this doesn't have to strip life of meaning. In fact, it can give us a deeper appreciation of our own role in shaping meaning. If there is no divine author, then we are the authors. We decide what is sacred, what is worth protecting, and how we treat each other. Recognizing God as a human invention doesn't require disdain for those who believe. It simply acknowledges the evidence that every description of God comes from human minds, that his traits mirror our own, and that his role in society shifts as we do. We made God, not the other way around. And perhaps the most remarkable thing is that we did so out of the very qualities that make us human: imagination, creativity, and the desire to find our place in the vast unknown.